Hi, my name's Gordon Bethwaite. I'm the CEO of Vitranu, here today to talk to you about the Tunable Extended Release Capsule. Sight is our most precious sense. If you ask most people what sense they would least like to lose, sight is top of the list. Unfortunately, diseases like age-related macular degeneration rob patients of that precious sense. As a degenerative retinal disease, macular degeneration progressively destroys the central visual field, the part of the eye that's responsible for fine detail resolution, such as looking at someone's face or reading. As an age-related disease, the incidence increases with the increasing age of the population, and 30% of patients over the age of 75 will have some form of macular degeneration, including my mother, who was diagnosed just a few years ago, and is somebody obviously that I want to make sure has her vision preserved for as long as possible. The good news is that there is a treatment. For the late stage of the wet form of the disease, drugs called anti-vascular endothelial growth factors are used to halt, to slow down, and potentially reverse some of the vision loss that occurs with that disease state. The downside with these treatments is that they require an injection into the eye, through the sclera, through the white in the side of the eye, as often as every month. Obviously, this is something that's not particularly pleasant for the patient, and it provides a huge burden on the healthcare system to provide the number of injections that are required to treat the population. The number of intravitreal injections that are performed is going up very quickly. There are currently over 500,000 performed in the US every month. That number is set to increase significantly as the population ages. What we're trying to do is to reduce that injection frequency. That brings with it several advantages. By reducing the number of injections, we can potentially increase patient compliance. If you give patient a longer duration of effect, you can potentially increase the compliance to the medication that's being provided. It solves what we call the systemic problem. There's only a certain number of doctors that are able to perform these procedures, and with more and more patients that need them, there's an increasing amount of pressure on the healthcare system to provide that standard of care. And we can ultimately drive better outcomes. If you provide patients with a longer duration of effect treatment, you can potentially give them better long-term visual outcomes at the end. So, the number one unmet need in this space is extended release, or extended duration of effect, to reduce the injection frequency and the volume of injections that are provided. Looking at the consensus need, a drug called Lucentis was introduced in the mid-2000s with an on-label indication of an injection every month into the eye, so 12 injections per year. And you can imagine the burden that places on both the patient having to get to the clinic to have the procedure performed, and also the healthcare provider that has this increasing number of injections to provide per patient. A few years later, Eylea came to market, and the on-label indication for this drug is 3 monthly doses followed by an injection every other month. So a reduction in injection frequency in year 1 from 12 to 7. This has resulted in a huge increase in the market size, currently over $12 billion with an 8% CAGR. It's a very quick growing market. Vitranu's solution has the promise to reduce injection frequency to 2 injections or fewer per year. This is our solution. We call it the Tunable Extended Release Capsule, and I'll explain why it's called tunable in a second. The technology basically is a capsule that's injected into the eye that carries a concentrated version of the drug to provide a longer duration of effect with fewer injections required per patient. We use polymer electrospinning to produce a double-walled capsule with parameters that can be tuned to match the elution characteristics required. It's able to be filled with various biologics, and it's tunable in several ways to provide steady-state drug release for each payload. We're designing the TERC to be injectable through a 25-gauge needle, which would essentially mean an in-office procedure for the patient. 5 millimeters in length, it's a very small implant that the patient doesn't perceive once it's in place. One of our differentiators is this space that we have in the center of the capsule that allows the biologic to be protected in vivo and provides stable bioactive release of the drug over the long term. And one of the tunable aspects that I mentioned earlier is the porosity that we're able to generate in the outer wall. By changing the manufacturing parameters, we're able to change the number and the size of the pores that are in the outer wall of the capsule to very finely tune how quickly the drug is released into the eye. The technology behind the TERC was invented at The Ohio State University and is licensed from OSU. I'm delighted to be working with both Professor Swindle Riley and Dr. Orr, 2 OSU employees who also serve as part of our executive team at Vitranu. In addition to Professor Swindle Riley and Dr. Orr, we've put together a great management team alongside an amazing medical advisory board with some of the thought-leading doctors in the retina space. And again, it's a privilege to be working with these individuals. Vitranu's vision is very simple: to preserve the sight of every patient with treatable retinal disease. I hope you'll join us in achieving that vision.
Can you talk a little bit about the competitive landscape? Are there other companies out there trying to do the same thing as Vitranu?
Yeah, I mentioned that this is an unmet need. And when we talk about an unmet need, the American Society of Retina Specialists held their annual meeting last month. I attended that meeting. And they do an annual survey of the retina doctors to identify the biggest unmet needs in the space. And year after year, the doctors say that reduction of injection frequency, reduction of the burden of injection is the #1 unmet need in the space. Even with the advent of things like gene therapy and longer lasting molecules, it remains something that's really high on their priority list. So there are lots of companies trying to figure out how to reduce that injection burden. In terms of the specifics of what we're doing, I really think that there's only one other company in the space that's trying to encapsulate anti-VEGFs and put them into the eye in the same way that we are. There is a surgical device that was just approved by FDA. Genentech, who are the owners of the Lucentis treatment, just got approval for, they call it the port delivery system. It's a surgically implanted device that stays in the eye permanently and is a refillable reservoir that can be refilled with Lucentis on a 6-monthly basis. And that really indicates that, one, the pharmaceutical company, and two, the market identifies and wants to have that need met. So, you know, the fact that this is a surgical intervention that still has a chance of penetrating in the market, I think is a really strong signal that a true extended release injectable biodegradable platform is something that's got a real good chance of success.
What does that do for your reception on the regulatory front?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting you mentioned that. The session that I attended at the American Academy of Ophthalmology, which was just last week, Vitranu actually presented at the Early Innovation Symposium. Wiley Chambers from the FDA was actually on the panel, and we talked a lot about the FDA's desire for and reception to sustained release and extended duration of treatment technologies. I think the indication, or the fact that the port delivery system was approved, shows that FDA has an appetite for reducing the injection burden. So one of our differentiators, one of the things that I think gives us a really strong chance of success, is that we're working with already approved standard of care biologics. We're not trying to implement a new molecule into the market, a new treatment regime. It's really about the longer duration delivery for gold standard, very safe and very effective drugs.
Can you talk a bit about the prevalence of macular degeneration and the types of macular degeneration that are being treated with this?
Yeah, so the form of the disease that's treated with an anti-VEGF agent is called wet macular degeneration. And it's a form of the disease where you have neovascularization, you have new vessel growth at the back of the eye. That's driven by the VEGF protein, or molecule rather. So the anti-VEGF protein knocks back that growth and stops that new vessel formation and the leakage that's associated with it. There are other forms of macular degeneration. In its late stage, what we call dry AMD, geographic atrophy is a huge, significant additional unmet need that there isn't currently a treatment for. There are some drugs in development for geographic atrophy, and they will require a monthly injection into the eye. The ones that are furthest along in their FDA processes, they're at phase 3 right now, and it looks like the most beneficial treatment regime for those patients is for a monthly injection. So we think that there's an additional opportunity in the geographic atrophy space for our technology. And then there are potentially other eye diseases which would also benefit from an extended duration of effect, not just retinal diseases, but other diseases of the eye. So those are definitely things that we're keeping an eye on, if you'll pardon the pun. We're looking for additional opportunities to enter into those market segments as well. But our main focus is anti-VEGF delivery for wet macular degeneration and other exudative retinal diseases.
Great, thank you. Apart from eye disease, do you see the tunable extendable release capsule being applicable anyplace else? that
Anywhere
technology?
else other than in the eye?
Yeah.
Yeah, potentially. Anywhere where there's a need for localized or even systemic delivery of a drug over a long term. The fact that we can tune the elution characteristics for a particular payload gives opportunities for delivery elsewhere as well. The big differentiator in the eye is that we're able to protect the anti-VEGF antibody proteins. So they're difficult to encapsulate or put into some kind of polymer matrix. So the fact that we can encapsulate them inside the capsule really provides that protection. That doesn't mean that a small molecule or another type of drug wouldn't be just as effective elsewhere in the body. So absolutely, yeah, we think that there are potential applications wherever there's a need for a sustained release option for delivery of a drug.
Where and how is the capsule being manufactured?
So it was serendipity that the technology came out of Ohio State University. And at the same time, the basics of the manufacturing process, which is polymer electrospinning, there just happens to be a company in Columbus that specializes in polymer electrospinning. They're called Nanofiber Solutions, and they're about 10 minutes from our office. So we have a development agreement in place with Nanofiber. They're a great partner for us. They have a lot of experience in the space, and we're building the manufacturing processes and finding out a host of new innovations as we go. So we're very lucky that they're on our doorstep and that they were willing to participate in our program.
Great, thanks. I'm going to ask a very self-serving question because you've recently moved from California to Columbus, Ohio to lead Vitranu. What do you think of the entrepreneurial ecosystem of Columbus?
So I'm super excited to be here, Cheryl. I think you and I have spoken a couple of times about how much I enjoy being in Columbus. It was a pretty easy decision for me to make. One, because the opportunity to lead Vitranu is something that I've kind of built my career towards. The CEO position of a startup company is something that I've always wanted to do. But the wider opportunity, I think, if you look at the amount of resources that are being put into the biotech and healthcare ecosystem in Ohio, it really feels like we're at the beginning of something significant. Amgen broke ground just this week on their new facility in New Albany, which is just around the corner from here. I think it's a real indication that the Midwest and Ohio in particular is being looked at much more seriously as a potential growth location for our industry. San Diego and Southern California is kind of like the Silicon Valley of ophthalmology. There's a lot of opportunity over there. But the difference is that I think being in Columbus and being at the vanguard, if you like, of that growth is super exciting. I'm planning on being here for a long time to come. I love the city. I'm surrounded by Buckeyes fans, so I'm kind of becoming an Ohio State fan by default. And yeah, I think it's a great place to be to do what we do.
Thanks, Gordon. I appreciate the plug.